Bedtime stories. Textual criticism in three parables. Textual criticism is like when a priest asks the bride, do you wish to take him as your husband? And do you promise to be faithful to him in prosperity, in adversity, in sickness, and in health, and thus to love and respect him all the days of your life? And she says, yes, I do. Then he asks the groom, do you wish to take her as your wife, and do you promise to be faithful to her in prosperity and in adversity, in sickness and in health, and thus to love and respect her all the days of your life? And he answers, yes, I don't want to. Perhaps I might want, but I'm not sure. And the bride, confused, asks him, do you want or not? And he answers, it's whatever you want. The priest, puzzled, says to him, young man, are you all right? And the groom says, yes, I'm fine. It's just that I'm giving her the chance to decide what I mean to say. She might think that because it's a shorter answer, what I mean is yes. Or she might add to the I do, making it yes, I do. Or she might not add anything and just stick with the short answer. The parish priest interrupts him, but you also said that you didn't want to, and that maybe you did. The bride turns to look at him, nervous and with tears in her eyes. He replies, yes, that's true. It could be any of the three. If she thinks I'm indecisive, then I believe she'll settle on the third answer. Perhaps I might, but I'm not sure. Although, if she thinks that I'm negative, pessimistic, who doesn't love her anymore, she might well decide on the I don't want to. So the bride says, what is your answer? And the groom says, whatever you want me to say. Then the bride faints, the priest sits down, confused, and the crowd of guests leaves, arguing which of the three is the right answer. Textual criticism is like a loving mother baking an apple pie. Her youngest son rushes excitedly into the kitchen and asks, Mom, did you bake an apple pie for me? She replies, it's not just for you, it's also for your older siblings too. Licking his lips, the boy asks, can I have a piece now? Smiling, his mother says, it's very late and it's not fully baked yet. You'd better go to sleep and have some in the morning for breakfast. So the boy kisses his mother and goes to bed. In the morning, he ran to the kitchen only to find that the apple pie had gone. Confused and upset, he went to find his mother and he said, you lied to me. You said there was a piece for me, but my siblings ate it all. She answered, Yes, your siblings took their own pieces, but then the dog knocked the pie onto the floor and ate almost all of it. After that, the ants came and carried off the crumbs. Resentful, the boy turned and walked away. But then he smiled and told himself, since there is no pie left for me, I am going to make my own pie today. Finally, textual criticism is like a detective who arrived at the scene of a crime on the ground floor of an apartment building with his assistant. The first thing he asked the forensic examiner was, what time did the deceased die? He replied, around 3 in the morning. The detective told his assistant, go to the upper floors and interview the tenants to see if they heard anything around that time. Meanwhile, I'll stay here with the forensic examiner and examine the body. So the assistant went upstairs, knocked on every door, and interviewed several neighbors in the building. When she finished, she came back down to meet her boss. The detective said, I think it was a suicide. What were you able to gather? Well, said the assistant, I have about 15 witnesses who heard something at that time. That many? Asked the detective. The assistant replied, there's a group of 3 medical students on the second floor who told me they were studying quietly when they heard a woman scream, then someone say, I'm going to kill you, and then 2 gunshots. They also complained that you can hear everything in the building, which is why they choose to study in the early hours of the morning. I also interviewed a man on the third floor who suffers from insomnia. He heard the same thing. Then there's the woman who cares for her husband. She was taking him to the bathroom when she heard exactly what the students described, a scream, the threat, and then 2 gunshots. The detective then asked, did all 15 hear the same thing? The assistant replied, yes, well, with some differences, but it's the same story. The scream, the threat, and the gunshots. The detective started walking and said to her, come with me to interview the people living here on the ground floor. The building manager says there are only 2 of them. So the assistant followed her boss, and they knocked on the first floor. After knocking persistently for a while, an elderly woman opened the door and put her hearing aids. When the detective asked if she had heard anything, she replied, I was asleep. I took a sleeping pill yesterday because I've been having trouble falling asleep lately. I was woken up by a dog barking, so I got up and heard people talking. The woman fell silent, so the detective probed, was there anything else, something like a scream or gunshot? The woman answered, no, I stayed awake, but I didn't hear anything else. Thank you very much, ma'am, the detective said as he took his leave. Then he went to the next apartment, where a teenager opened the door. Is your mom home? Said the detective. The young man replied, looking puzzled, no, she was on a shift at work yesterday and she hasn't come yet. Then the detective asked, did you hear anything this morning? Hear what exactly? The young man responded. The detective frowned and said something like noise, gunshots, screams. The young man answered, no, I didn't hear anything. Thank you very much, said the detective, walking away just as the teenager put his headphones back on and closed the door. Then the detective said to his assistant, there was definitely no scream, no gunshot, and no threat. The assistant looked at him with surprise and said, but the other neighbors heard all that. The detective replied, yes, but they are on the upper floors. Whereas these people being on the ground floor are the best witnesses. But the assistant began only to be interrupted by the detective. She had been about to point out that the elderly woman was deaf and that the teenager wore headphones, making them unreliable witnesses. But she remembered that her boss held a firm opinion and that only his opinion mattered. So before the assistant could finish her thought, the detective cut her off as they left the building and spotted a beggar sitting in the doorway. Look, he said, another potential witness. The detective crouched down and asked the beggar, who was holding a bottle of alcohol, if he had heard anything early that morning. No, said the beggar, just cars passing by. You see, the detective said, the best witnesses say they didn't hear a thing. The assistant remained silent uh, since she didn't want to lose her job and was hoping for a promotion within the police department. They walked toward their vehicle as the detective declared, this case is closed. And that's the end of bedtime stories for today. I hope you have a good night. Sleep and God bless you all.